Hello and welcome to Fight News Now Extra. My name is John Pollock. We've got Robin Black coming by to chat about today's headlines as Kung Lee will challenge his drug test results. Mark Munoz inks a new deal. And not only is the UFC returning to Canada next year, but they are promising a title fight for Canadians. UFC President Dana White spoke to the Canadian press this week and confirmed that Rory MacDonald will be getting the next welterweight title fight against the winner of Johnny Hendricks and Robbie Lawler, who are set to fight on December the 6th in Las Vegas. White added that MacDonald will also be receiving the title fight in Canada, but would not confirm what city it would take place in. Last week when we had Tom Wright on the show, he said that Toronto and Montreal would very likely be getting cards in 2015. Anderson Silva has changed his stance in regards to fighting for the middleweight title again in his career. Silva spoke this week about having 7 fights left on his UFC deal and that he does think about fighting for the title again, and if the opportunity arose to fight for the title, including a third fight with Chris Weidman, he would take it. Silva will return on January the 31st of next year to fight Nick Diaz after being inactive due to injury since UFC 168 last December. UFC middleweight Mark Munoz confirmed on MMA Junkie Radio this week that he has signed a new 4-fight deal with the organization, but has no fight lined up as of right now. Munoz has lost 3 of his last 4 fights and is coming off a submission loss to Gegard Mousasi from this past May, as he will look to rebound in his next outing. And Kung Lee will get the opportunity to appeal his positive post-fight drug test, which showed elevated levels of human growth hormone in his system following his loss to Michael Bisping in Macau back in August. The UFC will set up a third-party arbitrator to hear his case, as it was the UFC that oversaw this event rather than a commission. Lee has disputed the results, as have a number of anti-doping experts, including Dr. Don Catlin, who stated he would ignore the results in a statement made to journalist Gabriel Montoya. And I'm here with Robin Black to chat about all of today's news, lots of it to discuss. We can start off with Rory MacDonald, confirmed now, at least for now, from UFC President Dana White. He will get the winner of Johnny Hendricks and Robbie Lawler sometime in 2015, somewhere in Canada.
Yeah, I think...
the Yukon, here we come.
Yeah. Hey, Edmonton is looking for a fight card. Winnipeg wants to see it again. You know, could be anywhere, but I suspect it'll be Montreal in March.
Makes the most sense.
Yeah, that's the feeling that I'm getting. And, Ariel had Faraz on his show, and Faraz was saying, you know, now is the time. And they wanted it after Woodley, but they didn't get him. Faraz actually made a really good point. He's like, in the end, you talk about whether this guy earned it or that guy earned it. We'd like to think it's that way, but the UFC kind of gives the fans what they want. That's a nice way of saying the UFC does things that will result in good business, in good commerce, and in large pay-per-view sales and stuff. And now, this performance, I think, made people go, yeah, I do want to see that guy for the fight.
It's really something to watch, even going back 6 months when, you know, suddenly you had Johnny Hendricks now on top of this division after a long reign by George St. Pierre, and we were looking at this stacked welterweight division and so many different ways we can go, and really at the end of it, we're left with Rory MacDonald as the most logical contender after Robbie Lawler, and it's quite the feat to look at all of these welterweights, and at the end of it, Rory MacDonald really did kind of separate himself from the pack, in my opinion.
Great year for Rory, man. Like, think about it. Damian Maia, like, great fight. Really tough fight, gets taken down in the beginning, has a hard first round, and comes back and brutalizes him. And then he goes on to beat up Tyron Woodley. Was that next?
Tyron
Woodley, yeah. Jeez, think of that year, right? Think of Damian Maia, then Tyron Woodley, and then this fight and how amazing he looked in this fight against
He'll get some Fighter of the Year nods, absolutely.
Off the top of my head, he's mine so far. I mean, hell of a year.
Okay, a guy who's not having a hell of a year is Kung Lee, who is disputing his results from the human growth hormone test that was taken in Macau. It was overseen by the UFC, and a lot of people kind of they looked at that photo, and it was, when it came out that he had high levels of human growth hormone in his system, it was, well, this peg fits into that hole. That makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah. But now a lot of other information is coming out here. When you hear a heavyweight in the anti-doping field like Dr. Don Catlin stating he would ignore these test results because the 2 key tests for human growth hormone detection by WADA, those were not administered. Yeah. It was another separate test. And then on top of it, when Kung Lee's team wanted to see the contents of the B sample, you always take 2 samples for drug tests, they said, oh, we threw the B sample out.
Yeah.
Lots of head scratching in this particular one, and with this arbitration hearing set up, I really believe Kung Lee has a hell of a case.
For sure he does, for sure. Yeah, we threw out your B sample. Well, sorry, then the whole thing is moot. Do I think Personally, when I look at a guy in his 40s that's that shredded, that maybe something funky is going on, yeah, maybe. But if you screw this up like that, I mean, if we're going to do testing, we got to do it right. It's great that they want to do it. It's great that they want to get guys, but you can't be overzealous either. And human growth hormone, man, right after a fight is not the time to test for that stuff. There's natural elevation. You know, you need to fast for 12, to get the perfect test, you fast for 12 hours, you do it at a particular time, and that time ain't after a prize fight. And they didn't do the insulin growth factor 1 test. There's all of these things. You want to test for human growth hormone, we got to get to out of competition testing, random out of competition testing at like 2 o'clock in the morning, knocking on a door and doing it. That's really hard to do. You applaud them for wanting to do it and for wanting to really go after it, but they screwed this one up, and Kung Lee will probably be cleared of it.
I'm very surprised that they went this direction where the people administering the test, they were not accredited by WADA. They sent it to a lab that was not a WADA accredited lab. There is one in China that they could have used, and for whatever reason, a lot of questions coming up with this one. But nonetheless, that is where we are with the Kung Lee case. More developing with that particular story. But we have more Fight News Now Extra coming up, so sit back and check it all out.